Hi, Kim.
Hey, good morning. How are
Good
you?
morning. I'm good. How are you?
Good, thanks.
She said her latest inspection.
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Morning.
Morning. Looks like we just need Matt, so give it a few more minutes.
How is everybody?
Good, how are you?
Good.
Just enjoying life and wishing the smoke would go away.
Yeah, we've been up at Flaming Gorge and it was terrible up there too.
You would think so with the name.
Yeah. I mean, we drove through when we did the B section one day, and so we drove out the back way where they had a huge, it was over 7,000 acres that
Wow.
burned. And then it just poured a couple days. So I'm wondering, I mean, they had to have gotten some pretty heavy runoff from those burn areas.
Yeah, I was looking at the air quality monitoring, and it's like when we get really hazy around here with the smoke, we end up around, I forget what it is in the PM 2.5 counts, but we end up around 100 or something, and we're kind of up in the orange zone or something. And when they get to red, it's like 150, and they say, if you have asthma or something, stay inside. There are places in California yesterday that were at almost 800, which basically means you walk outside, you can't see.
Yeah, my father-in-law is in the Sacramento area,
Oh,
and they're not letting them come and go from the assisted living center anyways, but they do let him. He's really highly functioning at almost 91. But he goes out and does regular walks in the neighborhood, but they've restricted them and they can't leave because of the air quality.
oh, it's just unbelievable. It's just off the charts. I mean, when you saw those pictures a couple of years ago that were like Beijing and that area where it was, you couldn't see down the street. It's like, this is worse than that.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, I think we have everybody now, so go ahead and get started if that's all right. Welcome to the August 24th JTAB meeting. I'm Kim Felstead, Park City's Transit Manager, and we will go ahead and ask Cindy to please call roll.
Good morning. Our advisory board members in attendance from Summit County Council, we have Councilwoman Kim Carson, Councilman Chris Robinson.
Here.
From Park City Council, we have Councilman Tim Henney and Councilman Steve Joyce. Park City staff in attendance, we have Matt Diaz, Sarah Pierce, Kim Filstead, Vinnie Newen, Scott Birmingham, Robbie Smoot, Jerry Benson, Andy Stevenson. Summit County staff, we have Tom Fisher and Carolyn Rodriguez. Public, we have Bev Harrison and John Simmons.
Jamie Dancy from Summit County is also here.
He's on the line. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Cindy. The next item on our agenda is to adopt the electronic meetings determination. This meeting will be an electronic meeting without an anchor location as permitted by Utah Code Open and Public Meetings Act 52-4-2074 as amended on June 18th, 2020. The board hereby adopts this written determination of a substantial health and safety risk required by Utah Code section 52-4-2074. Board members will connect electronically. Public comments will be accepted virtually by raising your hand in Zoom. I'd like to call for a vote on this written determination. All in favor?
Aye.
Hi.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, great. Determination is in. Next, we will go on to the public comment. We did not receive any written comments from the public as far as I'm aware. Andy, have you received any written comments this morning?
I haven't received any, but Bev Harrison just raised her hand. So Bev, if you want to type your question in the Q&A chat box, I will read that out loud.
She might prefer to speak. Is there a way you can promote her to just let her ask her question? Is that a possibility?
Yeah, I can do
Or
that
make
as
her
well.
comment?
Yeah, let me do that.
I don't know. She might prefer that. Thanks.
Bev, I've allowed you to use your microphone. If you prefer to say it over the microphone instead of typing it, you can do it that way as well.
Okay, yes, I would like to do that. Hi, everybody. First issue is something I discovered quite a while ago. I want you to think about, it's about the SLC Connect and where it stops to take people to and from Salt Lake, which currently is Kimball Junction Transit. I don't understand why it's not stopping at the Park and Ride to take Parkites down to Salt Lake and bring them back again to their cars, which could be parked at that lot, and then go inbound to Snyderville Basin and PC. I don't understand why the Connect doesn't stop there. So I asked a bus driver quite a while ago, and I realized that. And he said the Connect used to go down Kilby and stop at Ecker Hill lot, but the road was too narrow, or something happened so that it was difficult for it to negotiate getting into that lot. And if that's the case, that's a real shame. And the reason I noticed that, like I started saying, what I want you to do is get at the corner, visualize being at the corner of Powderwood Drive and Kilby Road, and you're heading outbound toward Pinebrook and Summit Park. There's a sign right in front of you, a legal green park and ride sign that indicates there's a park and ride to the left. So I looked at that and I thought, well, if you live inbound of that sign, anywhere in Snyderville or PC, and you see that sign, that would be great if you could go left and get on a SLC Connect at Ecker Hill, but you cannot. So I'm thinking, why would anybody from Snyderville or PC want to take a left and only to be able to park at Ecker Hill lot and then go inbound on Lime, which of course doesn't make sense. So it seems like the system is set up to get a SLC to stop at that Ecker Hill lot, which would be great because it would direct you at that intersection, Powderwood and Kilby, to go left and get in that lot, get on the bus, go to Salt Lake, and then get off at that Pinebrook exit and come back to the lot in the afternoon and go get your car and come inbound. So what happened there is my question.
Good question.
Kim, this is Caroline, do you want me to take a stab at the answer, or do you want to go ahead?
No, please do, since I was not here when that changed.
Okay. So the issue is not that a bus cannot navigate to the park and ride, Bev. It's that we wanted to maintain our current time points because of our riders that depend on it. And because the time points are so tight, UTA doesn't have the time to serve that park and ride and travel on Kilby and maintain the existing service without adding an entire additional bus and operator.
Okay. Well,
that's the simple reason.
Yeah, well, it'd be wonderful if we could somehow renegotiate that, because we are missing all the Parkites who drive down to Salt Lake. We're missing them. There is not enough room to park at the Kimball Junction Transit lot. It's not a big enough lot. And
so the bus does serve the Jeremy Park and Ride going down. It just didn't during the construction, but it does as of today. It's reinstated. So anyone can park at the Jeremy Park and Ride as well.
How big is that lot though? Nothing can possibly be as big as that wonderful Ecker Hill lot that sits there much too empty.
It's not as big, but there is enough capacity to hold the riders on the bus.
Okay, well, that doesn't quite make sense to me, and I would love to be able to have those of us who live here be able to use the Ecker Hill lot. But you're saying we couldn't get on the bus because there's not enough room on the bus.
No. What I'm saying is the particular reason that the UTA bus does not serve the lot on on Kilby Road is because there's not enough time.
Okay.
And we did try it. We tried it for about a week,
Right.
and we got a lot of complaints because it was so late, and then that time compounds,
Mhm.
and it's just extremely expensive to add another bus and operator
Okay.
to be able to serve that lot at this point.
Yeah, I understand that, but it would be wonderful to look into that, to give us an option to get onto the Connect there.
Okay, Bev,
Sure.
we'll certainly note your concern. Are there any other comments from the public at this time?
Oh, Bev again. One more, the bike racks that I hear are being ordered by the county. That is wonderful, wonderful, wonderful news. Now that more of us are riding bikes, and e-bikes are the way to get around. They're transportation. They're not necessarily recreational bikes. And lo and behold, we have very few places to park our bikes, which is sort of similar to parking your car. And I heard some are being ordered. Just to let you know, I'm talking with Basin Rec, David Kotler on the board. He's interested in Basin Rec trailheads to mitigate car parking for hikers who would like to ride a bike and then hike. And also, green businesses, Recycle Utah. There's 100+ green businesses in our area. And we are working to have that added, installing a bike rack added as a green goal for those businesses. And PC Roaster is the first one to do that. They have installed a bike rack in front. So that's great news. It'd be nice to get a bunch of them around the community. Okay, the end.
Thank you, Bev. Good to hear your voice again.
Yeah.
All right, is there anyone else from the public that has a comment at this time? Okay, looks like we can go ahead and proceed then to our discussion items. First thing on the agenda is review and acceptance of the July 20th meeting minutes. Are there any recommended changes to the minutes? Okay, hearing none, the minutes are approved. And I apologize, we are going to switch order a little bit on the agenda this morning. Next, we want to go into our winter route efficiency analysis and assessment presentation. Planner Scott Birmingham is going to present that for us. And just so you know, our plan is to discuss the winter service today, but we would like to come back to the September JTAB for a final decision, and then we would take that to council for public input at that point. So please go ahead and proceed, Scott, if you're ready.
All right, thanks. So today we're coming with a recommendation for 35% service reduction for this upcoming winter. This recommendation came after careful consideration of several factors. One was the economic impacts of COVID-19. Two was we're looking at transit-dependent populations, where they are, what buses they're riding. And three, we're just looking at the routes and the ridership on the routes, what time we had the highest ridership, and those sort of things. So we'll go ahead and go through this route by route, starting with the one red. So on the one red, last year, the one red went from Quinn's Junction, it went through Prospector Square area, and it went up to the resorts in Main Street from there. It ran every 20 minutes. This year, we're looking at changing it to every 30 minutes, and we're looking at cutting off the Quinn's Junction piece of it and having that served by an on-demand service. The two green, last year it served the Park Meadows Staines Canyon area, as well as going up to the resorts, both resorts and Main Street. We'll keep that routing with this recommendation and change it from 20-minute frequency to 30-minute frequency. The three blue, last year, it went backwards for the most part from the two green. So it started in Thames Canyon and then Park Meadows and then up to the resorts in Main Street. We're recommending to cut that service due to it being somewhat redundant of the 2 green. The 4 orange services Upper Deer Valley and Silver Lake. So that went from the resort up to Main Street into Snow Park, and then on up Royal Street to Silver Lake. We plan on keeping that on its 30-minute frequency that was last year. But we're looking at having it be a very much peak service type thing where it only serves from 6:30 to 10:30, and then once again it comes back on from 3 to 7, whereas last year it went from 6:30 to 11 p.m. Continuous. 5 yellow. This one is an express bus to the Prospector Square area. Last year it went from Prospector up Bonanza and Park Avenue to Main Street and then up to Deer Valley. It was on 20-minute frequency, and we're recommending to change that to 30-minute, and also to add the Park City Mountain Resort to the route. The 6 Lime, last year went from Eckert Hill to Kimmel Junction to Canyons, up to Park City Mountain and Deer Valley, as well as Main Street. Well, it was interlined with the 4 orange, I should say that. So technically it just went to the Park City Mountain. So I hope I didn't confuse anybody there. So it goes to Park City Mountain. And then that was every 15 minutes last year from 6 a.m. to 12. We're looking at changing that to be 15 minutes. Well, it'd be 30 minutes from 6 a.m. to 11 p.m. And then we'd have some peak service buses running from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. and from 3 p.m. to 7 p.m. And we'd also like to extend that route on up to Main Street and Deer Valley this year. The 7 Pink, this one last year went from Summit Park through the Pine Brook area to Eckert Hill and Kimball Junction, and then went through Redstone New Park area, the Silver Springs area, and then on into Canyons area, servicing all the way up to Grand Summit. This one we would keep on its 30-minute frequency, keep the hours almost the same. We just cut off an hour from the end of the service. There is some discussion of maybe changing the routing, cutting out Silver Springs to make it more efficient and convenient for riders. The 8 Brown has currently been, it's going to be run by the county starting today. And it should stay close to the same as last year, maybe cutting the hours on it slightly as well, just by 1 hour, I think, as well, like the 7 Pink. The 9 Purple, this services Empire Pass. It would have the same routing as last year. It basically goes from Main Street up to Montage, Empire Pass area. We'd keep the 30-minute frequency. But on this one, we would also go to a peak service instead of running from 6:40 a.m. to 10:40 a.m. or I'm sorry, 6:40 to 11:10 p.m. We'd run it only from 6:40 to 10:40 a.m. and 2:40 to 6:40 p.m. This is another route that we're looking for discussion on whether we should cut this route entirely. If we did that, we'd have some additional savings that we'll look at all the savings for all the routes later on, but this would be some additional savings from what I have listed on the table. The 10 White, so this is our express between Main Street and Kimball Junction. We would change this frequency from 10 minutes last year from 6:40 to 12:10 a.m. and change it to 15 minutes from 6:40 a.m. to 7:10 p.m. and then 30 minutes from 7:10 to 11:10 p.m. The 11 Black is the Camas commuter bus. I would like to keep that the same as last year. Currently, we've cut it down to having only 2 AM peak buses and 3 PM peak buses. So currently there's 1 fewer AM peak buses. But I'd recommend we go back to the same as last year for the winter time. And then the citywide, this bus runs early in the morning and late at night. It would be the same routing as last year. It basically goes through all of the in-town areas: Prospector Square, Park Meadows, Thames Canyon, the resorts in Deer Valley, or resorts in Main Street. This one would keep the same hours and same everything as last year, basically. And then finally the trolley, we're looking to cut that this year. Don't know if there's much else to say on that one. If you look then down the table, you can see that estimated savings for each route, and that with all these cuts, we would end up with about a $2 million savings from last year. So that's basically it. It's open for discussion or questions, comments.
I just wanted to clarify, I apologize, there is a typo on this table for the 10 white. So from 7:10 p.m. to 11:10, it goes to 30-minute service. So perhaps, Scott, we could start with some discussion on the pink, about eliminating the loop there, Silver Springs.
Can I actually do kind of a higher level thing before we get into details on individual ones?
Yes, please.
To me, this is, and you guys are put in a really difficult position here because you're trying to look into the magic crystal ball and figure out what this winter is going to look like. But when I go back and look at the stats, the ridership numbers that we have going right now, we've kind of flattened out. We were starting to pick up through kind of, April to May to June. It was kind of cranking back up a little bit. But we've kind of stabilized a little bit at a level that's got, 75, 80% down on a lot of the current ridership compared to last year this time. And at least so far, until we discover that, things change dramatically, we're not having any discussions about changing things like the parking requirements for Main Street or anything like that. We're still looking at free parking right now. And if the resorts are, I'm just going to make up a number because my crystal ball sucks too. If the resorts are running at, say 50 or 60% or something, then all of a sudden it becomes very easy to park or much easier to park at the resorts. It felt a little high, I would say, to see that we're talking about running at, basically down 35%, since that would actually be a pretty huge ramp up, both, off season into the winter, and then 80% down to only 35% down. I know there's got to be some sort of, meets minimum kind of thing in here that says you just don't want to go below this and still offer a decent service to the people who need it. But is there any way that we can kind of step down even a little bit more to reflect the current, 75% off, and then step up? I know that, we run into problems hiring drivers, and we run into problems every time we have to shift schedules, and we become less reliable to people and stuff like that. But did you guys look at doing even more cut, or is this where you think the minimum is, or?
Yes.
Yeah, so,
Sorry, go ahead, Scott.
I was just going to say, so if we ran what we are currently running right now, that would be about a 60% cut. And the feeling is that the current service we have right now would not be sufficient for the winter. And so, yeah, we are trying to find that balance. What is an adequate level of service for the winter? A winter that we really don't have a crystal ball to predict what it's going to be. And this is what we've fallen on, is the 35% cut.
Right. We definitely looked at a lot of different variables, and like you say, Steve, it's a crystal ball exercise for sure. But from my perspective, it's better to overshoot it a little because you can always, reduce your head count if that's the case, versus to call it too low and then the demand's so high we wouldn't have time to implement it again, to do anything to address it. So I think we feel pretty confident that this is the right sweet spot to get to. But of course, we'll only know when we have it happen.
How do the,
Can you show this map as a visual for people? I think it might be just
49, isn't it?
yeah. While we're talking about it, I just think sometimes it's a nice visual if people have questions.
Maybe not, I don't know. That's it. Is the $2 million in savings over this winter period enough to match what your projections are on revenues?
Yes, and more. So we're just trying to run the right balance, not necessarily just meet the budget.
Right, but
But when you say it matches, is that using all the CARES money or what? How does that fit in?
Well, we are requesting CARES money now, and that would certainly allow us to supplement service. But we're trying to be conservative and not utilize that to put the service out there for this winter. So this is well within our projected budget, which only accounted for 1.5 million of CARES money, and we're getting more than that, getting up to 6.
So can I just make sure I heard that right? So if we get 5 or 6 or whatever million for CARES, and you take 1.5 of that and use it this year, then these changes get us in at budget or under budget?
Under budget.
Okay. I thought I heard that. I just want to make sure I was getting that right. Thank you.
And I think just to parrot off of that, providing 60% of last year's winter service is an attempt to sort of balance our best guess in terms of revenues with a reasonable guess in terms of ridership. We've had a lot of conversations lately with the hotels and with the resorts about their workforce. And so in terms of the ridership, we're trying to guess, how many visitors are going to be taking the bus, as well as how many employees and transit dependent individuals. And then also trying to balance, our revenue decline, which as a result of when the COVID-19 hit, we were very fortunate this year. But I will put out there, it's not the existing fiscal year that we are wary of or fearful of. It's not that we're not being conservative and in full recession mode. It's actually next year is the year that I'm terrified about, to be perfectly honest. And so everything we can do this year to be surgical, save money, be efficient, I think is just forward funding resources for year 2, year 3, and year 4 of the economic impacts of COVID to the transit system, because, by and large, most of the transit revenues are dependent upon visitation, in that the hard dedicated revenues, as well as just general sales tax, is all volume equation. The more people we have here that are buying and eating and shopping, the more sales tax we get, the more of that money is turned into our transit system. So I am really worried about years 2, 3, and 4. What we're trying to do this year is balance, again, revenue, hopefully being able to forward fund some funding with levels of ridership that are seriously reduced, as you said earlier.
And fully support Matt and what he was just saying, and what the transit folks are attempting to do. I agree totally that our biggest trouble years are going to be 22, 23, 24. As visitorship starts to come back, the revenues are going to lag behind that as far as budgeting is concerned. So we're going to have to play this very tight.
So you're right, Steve, in that we absolutely could be more aggressive. I mean, I don't want to don't want to overlook that. That's a very reasonable desire or question to have us explore. So we're just trying to hit that sweet spot with preserving revenue for future years when we really have the demand with levels of ridership this year in transit dependent populations. So, you know, another way of summarizing it is there's a recommendation to temporarily suspend the blue. There's a recommendation to temporarily suspend the purple. We are changing the level of service on the brown. We can eliminate some of the inefficiencies in the existing system through some of the redundancies, like going to neighborhoods like Silver Springs and others. We can temporarily suspend the trolley. And then in every other area of the system that we can still provide base levels of services, we're elongating headways or trying to match our level of service with peak demand. So a lot of these routes now, Lime and the Orange and others, are trying to meet that peak demand in the morning for guests visiting the resorts or individuals trying to get to work, and then also servicing it in the afternoon. I like what you've done with the Lime. From what I can tell, it looks like we're trying to provide some type of I'll call it a one-butt service to Deer Valley and the resort. So I think that's a significant change too that I think our resort partners will be happy about.
I've got a question. I'd like to riff on this discussion a little bit. And my question is for all of staff, and it's high level. Like Steve, I want to sort of step back and ask all of you, are we being aggressive enough at doing an analysis of the underlying system that we have in place, given the fact that the system that we have in place has been cobbled together in an ad hoc fashion over the last 40 years. And this moment in time where we're looking at, tweaking this and finding an efficiency there and trying to find the proper balance between transit dependent ridership and revenues and looking at our crystal ball, seems to me it would be an opportunity to be very aggressive in analyzing the structure of the system and trying to refine that in a way that we might not otherwise have an opportunity to do, because the changes would be so dramatic and so drastic that we would be, we wouldn't want to do it because it would disrupt ridership in a way that would be unacceptable to those who are riding. Right now, we don't have ridership. And so it's a simple question, and I'm going to assume that you all are looking at the overall system at a very fundamental structural way and analysis to determine if there are some really significant changes that we can make, like, doing something with the Lime. That's a structural change. That's not, clipping some headway and saving some money because, we don't have to run 6 buses, we can run 4 buses and stuff like that on the existing route structure. So my question is more about the route structure. Are we doing enough to look at that?
I think we've been looking at it pretty aggressively. I'm sure Scott has something he'd like to weigh in with as well, but we're just trying to balance the needs of the transit dependent and ensure that they can still get to the places they need to go to work, and also be as efficient as possible and save money. I'll be honest, we are going out right now to an RFP for software that would help us do this kind of analysis even better. Unfortunately, the way Scott has to do it right now is pretty manual. So I have high hopes that going forward, that software is going to give us even greater efficiencies and opportunities to be more bold. But I do feel that we have looked at this long and hard and that we have come up with a solid recommendation.
Thanks, Kim. And so that's from the Park City perspective. I'd love to hear Summit County weigh in with a similar assessment from the Summit County perspective.
Caroline, go ahead.
Yeah. I guess I'd have to think a little bit. I don't have a great answer right off the bat. Have we done a thorough analysis? No, we don't have the time or manpower to do that right at this moment. I think we're just trying to keep up with times and sort of keep our head above water. But what I will say is that I'm really confident with what the Park City staff has provided and proposed. And I think they've done a really great job in addressing what's going on right at this moment and what will be going on in winter to the best of their ability. And we've been, you know, talking back and forth about that. Should we do a more robust analysis? Yes, probably. Would we on the county side be able to get that done before this winter? No, that's not, I don't think that's reasonable for us because of what's required to do that.
You know, something else to note here is that we have a lot of peak service that we're trying in this winter version. That's not typical for Park City. We have run the same, you know, bus service at 15-minute intervals or 30-minute intervals all day long. We have not focused on the peaks and just addressing where the majority of our riders are at. So that is a huge change that maybe isn't as obvious, you know, when you're looking at the table, but it's something that we're really excited about. Now, that's obviously going to have an impact on our operators' work schedules. You know, when you have peak service, you're looking at split shifts and part-time. But, you know, that is kind of the nature of transit when you're trying to be as efficient as possible with the dollars that you do have.
Well, I just want to reiterate, you know, I think there's an opportunity here. Kim, you inherited this system. You know, a lot of your staff kind of inherited what you're now working with. And I think we should have some analysis and focus on using the minimum service to provide to transit dependent and then building the system that we want and hope for and desire for the future on top of that, instead of working with a system that has been put together ad hoc through decades, you know, with financial constraints and all sorts of constraints that may or may not be current and may or may not be affecting the reality of the future. So I think there's an opportunity to look at this whole thing and kind of move in the direction that we all want to move in. You know, from the county taking over county responsibility of transit, from the city looking at city routes and assessing whether, you know, the purple actually makes sense. I mean, maybe I hear, you know, we could get rid of the purple. We're eliminating the trolley for a period of time. And so those are the sort of route structure questions and issues that I think we have a great opportunity to look at, and we can build upon something and achieve, you know, a vision of future that I don't think we had the opportunity to look at and to achieve before this hit. And I hope we take advantage of that.
Tim, I do want to add something. We have looked at, you know, changing things this winter. A good example is the red and the yellow. The red is a high ridership route. So moving it to 30 minutes would not be sufficient for the capacity. So we changed the yellow to go up to the resort as well. So that's just an example. So there's now 15-minute frequency through Prospector going both to the resort and to Main Street, Deer Valley. That's just one example of something we've done this year. But what my hope is, and what we really need to analyze is not so much maybe this year, but I see opportunities coming with BRTs in the future from, you know, we got Quinn's Junction coming online. We have a possible 224 BRT coming online. There's the Arts and Culture District coming up. And so my hope is that we're going to analyze everything when we put together the system with those pieces put in place. So that's kind of what I'm looking at, if that makes sense.
That does, Scott. Thanks for, you know, adding that bit. I know that it's a very fluid and dynamic situation, always evolving and changing, and we're going to have to deal with that. And you know, so thanks for addressing my concern. I think I'll just continue to, talk about the opportunity that exists to create something that we want. Kim, like I said, you inherited this system. It may not be the system that you envision as being possible. And I'd like there to be enough energy going into that concept of let's create what we want instead of tweaking what we have. And I know we have to tweak what we have, but there is an opportunity to create what we want.
I totally agree, Tim. Thank you for continuing to bring it up. Because I think we can, that everything can be on the table, that we don't have to be constrained by the past that may have evolved over, without, just evolved over a period of many years with lots of different constraints and forces that now may be moot.
There is a silver lining, right? I guess to the situation at hand, for sure. Now is the time to experiment.
I've heard a very wise man say, never let a good crisis go to waste.
I think that too, yeah.
But so I just at an administrative level, that support and that policy direction is really helpful to us. So to summarize, hearing consensus from the Park City officials and the Summit County officials that you want us to continue to be, responsive of the demand, responsive of the revenue constraints, but being aggressive in how we rethink and think about the level of and type of transit services moving into the future. And, again, I don't want to minimize what we're doing here. It is intentional that we're reducing demand by 40%. To be honest, we anticipate it's going to be probably 50% of what it was last year, but we want to outpace that by 10% so we can deal with the kind of flux and demands and load in and load outs. And that's why we're beating it by 10%. That's why it wasn't a straight 50% reduction. But just to summarize at a high level, because there will be a great impact to our lodging partners, to the resorts, to the employees, and to residents. We have 12 total lines. 4 of them are being fully temporarily suspended. 2 of them are being drastically kind of augmented, or we're eking efficiencies out of not hitting same neighborhoods. And so if we do get support for this plan, and we can always go further. So if that's your prerogative, if you wanted to see a model that we go further, we can gin that up too. But we've got some public outreach and some communication that we need to do, because there will be a lot of folks impacted by these changes. And that's the reason we've built in this meeting before coming back in the next JTAB meeting, visiting with both of our councils, trying to make sure that we amplify this message to all of our partners, public, private, school kids, all sorts of people will be impacted by this, minimum 40% reduction.
So is it fair to say then that in the next couple of weeks, it sounds like you're getting consensus. I don't think we've heard from Kim, but at least Tim and Chris have spoken up. I've spoken up that if we have consensus here with JTAB, that you guys will start going to the lodging association, especially if there's people if you hit the purple, then the Montage gets hit specifically, obviously the resorts. So you guys, even before it comes to council, you'll be reaching out to those people so that they can come to our city and county council meetings and speak up there, or?
Yeah, so we plan to deploy newspaper ads, get on the radio, update our website, have the app amended so people know that there's an alert, there's a service plan change coming. Here's how you contact your elected officials. We'll notice it in our agenda packet. We'll do everything we can, meet with stakeholders, make sure that we're working with lodging and HPCA and others so they understand that there will be impacts this next year that are based upon a reflection of the ridership and the revenue constraints that we're facing.
And this is Kim, and I definitely support the conversation that's taken place. I think we can always do better, but I think this is a good start for this winter. And in a previous conversation with Tom and Chris and Caroline, we discussed the importance of communication to our constituents around this and making sure we had a good plan in place for marketing and communicating the changes and making sure they understand the reasons why that we're trying to find that balance that we've talked about.
One of the things I would suggest to our transit folks, especially when you have discussions with the big employers like the big lodging facilities and things like that, is, you know, if the answer is we can provide, and I like the fact that you guys are kind of working on more peak hour stuff, but I mean, if the answer was that Montage could change their work schedules so that people arrived in kind of a 1 hour period, you know, kind of thing, where they compressed it instead of showing up all over the morning. And therefore we could provide service literally, I'm making this up, but literally like 2 trips up the mountain with the Purple Line or something. I would love for us to be flexible to try to continue service as efficiently as possible. And I think historically the resorts and the lodging have kind of said, no, here's my work schedule. This is how it works. And therefore we need people coming in between, you know, 6:30 in the morning and 10. And it's like, well, then you get nothing. But if you can compress it down to 1 hour, we could give you something. I mean, just consider being open to ideas like that and consider giving them a good hard nudge if they start pushing on this.
Okay. So I guess what I'm hearing is that the level of cuts we're comfortable with. Maybe we even want to go a little further. We want to try some things that we wouldn't try perhaps if we weren't in the situation at hand. And because of that, I would like to have maybe some route specific conversations in this JTAB if possible. I don't know if everyone's ready to do that, but we've got, you know, a considerable proposal on the Purple, and that is something that we'd like to hear your input on how you would feel about eliminating that route altogether.
My first question would be, have there been any conversations with Montage yet?
I have had some conversations with Montage, and they are quite concerned about that. They're still planning on hiring about 70 employees from out of the country. And so they're concerned that this will impact their business greatly.
So I'll chime in if that's okay, just to give you a little bit more input for the policymakers. You know, the difficulty with this particular line for us is that it's a very transit dependent population, but it's really to one employer. It's to one node. It's not, conversely, we're not sending service up to Silver Lake where there's multiple different types of employers in a village that are hiring individuals that are transit dependent or servicing the base of the canyons. Conversely, somewhere like UOP, they run their own shuttle for their own employees down to Kimball Junction, because it's, you know, it is somewhat uncommon for a public transit system to provide a specific level of service really to a specific property. So this is one that we've gone back and forth with in terms of staff. We're very partial to the demands of a transit dependent population. However, we're a little bit overwhelmed sometimes when we look at the revenue and the ridership of running that line all day, when really it's for one property. It's not servicing a larger areas with multiple hotels, people working at the resort, and vice versa. It's really just for the Montage. So we've struggled with this one, and that's the reason we teed it up.
Is it reasonable to suggest to the Montage, and I guess it's easy to suggest, but is it something that would be worth discussing that says, look, you know, we can bring your people up and drop them off at Silver Lake, and you could run your shuttle to grab people from Silver Lake the last, you know, 3 miles or whatever to the Montage. And so you're at least not having to pick up from, you know, Kimball Junction and Prospector and whatever. We'll get them up really close to you, and then it's your duty to do the last little bit.
Well, yeah, I think we can certainly work together and try to find some solutions, creative solutions.
It might be helpful to make sure that they understand the cost per rider, even at their peak times, you know, showing them past data and then what they're projecting, so they really realize the impact.
So I'm hearing support for this concept and maybe going back and just having some more specific conversations with the montage to see what some options could be.
I agree.
Yes.
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 Okay. Great. Then how about any discussion that we want to have on the pink with eliminating the Silver Springs loop?
Yeah, Kim and Scott, do you think you could give our elected officials a sense of the ridership numbers on that loop? I know it's really low, but I don't know that I don't know that we have a good sense of like how low that ridership that ridership is on that loop.
Okay. Yeah. I don't have that data at hand. I don't know, Scott, if you or Robbie would know that offhand. Something we could certainly come back with.
Yeah, can we pull up that grid that Robbie came up with that has the ridership ranked by route?
Is that the APC that you just passed, or is there another grid?
Well, yeah, so the conversation that we've had about the pink is that because it services the Canyons base and it runs through Kimball Junction, it has a fairly high level of ridership. And so from a route prioritization framework, it has a fairly high utilization. However, this Silver Springs node, where we dive off of 224 and enter into a predominantly residential subdivision, large homes, 2-3 car garages, that's where we get very little level of ridership. However, the route overall is fairly well utilized. And so looking at efficiencies, worrying about headways, trying not to hire, 3 new bus drivers to handle a 30-minute headway compared to a 15-minute headway. This was an area that we were looking at to eke some efficiency out, thinking that a resident in Silver Springs in a large single-family home may be less inclined this year in particular to ride the transit system because of COVID-19, because of less occupational opportunities, probably because the resorts won't be as busy. And quite frankly, less people are just riding transit in general. And so that's the reason we teed this up as a potential area for efficiency. Keep the route, make it more efficient.
And to further that, Matt, the multifamily housing that exists in Silver Springs is mostly towards the front near the Blue Roof, where it's still within walking distance to 224 in that node. So,
and I should have said out on 224 where the pink around Ecker, the pink gets a high level of utilization from that multifamily housing as well, which we don't want to diminish the service on. In fact, we get great ridership there and we want to maintain the levels there.
How long does that detour take? I drive that neighborhood a bit. It's not quick. It must take 10 or 15 minutes, doesn't it?
I bet it
It
does.
takes about 5 minutes each way.
5 minutes each way, so it's not that much.
But
so
10 minutes in the total route is quite a bit.
What do you mean by each way? I mean coming and going? So
yeah, it goes both directions in Silver Springs. So
yeah. So I think it's a rational change. If for some reason, most of the homeowners in Silver Springs are probably not transit dependent, and it is low density, as has been pointed out, and the ridership is low. And it looked like it saved $24,000 or something over the period.
that's actually just for the hour that we cut off the end of it from ending at 11:45 last year to 10:45 this year. That's what you save with that 1 hour.
What is it? What does it save by eliminating the loop?
This actually doesn't necessarily save a lot of money. It'd mostly be more efficient, convenient, provide better on-time performance, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, better customer experience too. It's kind of annoying to get drugged through a loop if you're trying to get from point A to point B.
I would probably be so annoyed I wouldn't take it. Um,
Those of us that go between Park City and Kimball Junction or the Park and Ride avoid the pink as much as we can because of
a
that.
nice scenic detour, though, if you want to go on.
If you're looking for property in Silver Springs, yes.
I'm in support of our removing the loop.
I am too. We may need to have a conversation about the bus stop renovation plans, though. As 2 of those stops are within this area, maybe we want to reprioritize ours, but we can discuss that when we get to it.
And to me, this is one where I just will completely look to Kim and Chris and just, I mean, this is, to me, this is your line and your people that you're either going to ignore their stop, or eliminate their stops or not. And so whatever you guys feel like is good with me.
Well, are there any of the other options that have been presented here on the other routes that you would like to discuss further at this point? Or?
Yeah, Kim, one of the things that you all were going to show is the number of buses that were in the resort base last year versus this winter proposal. Is that something you had time to prepare, or will we see it next time?
We definitely looked at that. We can show it next time. There was not a quick, concise way to put that in easy, digestible format. So we can bring that back for sure.
Kim,
okay, thanks.
Sorry, Kim, can you also just run through the fact that you are suggesting that the red no longer go out to Quinn's and that's going to be serviced by, can you just cover that? And then also any impacts, and just to call out the impacts and the fact that we're not running the blue and that was somewhat of a contentious line the year before. I just want people to fully understand from the policy level, these changes have impacts and just what the framing or what the reference of those is.
And let me follow that, Matt, that thought just before Kim answers. It might be a good idea for our staffs to put together some kind of guide for what we're going to hear as a result of this, most likely. I know we're going to get a couple of folks from Silver Springs, for example, that are going to say, I'm never riding the transit system again because you're not dropping me off in the neighborhood. And we've heard that stuff before. So it just might be helpful for that and to guide some of our communications.
Okay. Yeah.
I looked at the ridership on there and it's about 1 person per day on average on most of the stops. So it's not too bad.
1 person per day or per minute?
Per day, but that's since COVID.
Oh, since COVID.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, on the one red, that would be the change that people might complain about, is that we're no longer covering Quinn's with that we would go to on demand. It's my understanding in the past we have had that model. So the main thing I think is communication, so people do know their options and understand that. That could be seen as an issue. And Scott, please chime in as we go through this if you're seeing any other possibilities I'm not covering.
Well, because the thrust of this, Kim, was that this was the way to use public transportation to get to the hospital.
Right.
And so now there is an alternative, which is on demand.
Mm-hmm.
But just the thrust is we had a fixed route to the hospital. And so this one, like any of these, because of where we are with COVID and economics and finances, there is a potential concern here, and we just want to call it out.
I think that most people are aware that we're in uncharted territory and unusual times, and will cut more slack toward the exigencies of the day than they would if we were in prosperous circumstances making these cuts.
The one thing that I would ask you, I mean, I think it's close to the last page where we had the annual passenger counts by route and hour, and you picked the time, which is, I guess, kind of the winter months as they existed in the COVID world of December 6th, 2019 through March 6th, 2020. It would be interesting to just pull real quick over that exact same period of time, the ridership, the total ridership numbers for any of the stops that we're looking at eliminating. So out at the hospital, the Silver Springs ones, because it's hard for me to make these judgments and not know. I mean, I know we put this in place and made a big deal about the hospital, but if the answer is, yeah, but one person a day was taking it out to Quince Junction, it doesn't make any sense, then I have no problems with it. If the answer is, no, between People's Health Clinic and the Peace House and the hospital, 150 people a day were riding it out to there and getting either on or off those stops, then all of a sudden I have a real issue with, you know, cutting that service and trying to do that with demand. But I don't have any of those numbers. So all I see is just total route numbers and not stop numbers, but you're not looking at eliminating routes, you're looking at eliminating stops. So
Okay.
it would help us, I think, certainly before we see this as councils.
Okay, sure, we can definitely get that.
Yeah, and I agree with Steve's comments on that. And Robbie probably has a little historical perspective on ridership on the red, you know, what is now the red that extends out to the Quinn's campus, because we did run a on-demand, and I don't think anybody ever used it. I mean, yeah, so a person now and then would use it, but boy, it was rare. And when we made it a fixed route, I think we did see, and this is just from recollection of discussion and kind of my recollection of looking at how, you know, ridership increased out to the hospital and the Quinn's campus. I think we saw a nice pickup in ridership and demand and service, and everybody was pleased with that. And of course, we are in a new situation with COVID, and people will be more forgiving and understanding. And that, I think, goes without saying. But to Steve's point, there is a way to compare what we did from a historic perspective with on demand and compare it to what happened when we went fixed route, and then try to overlay what needs to be done with the COVID consideration. And maybe it's a temporary, like the pink not going into the Silver Springs neighborhood, that is a temporary, we're framing it as a temporary, and maybe once we come back and do something, it gets into that, you know, structural realignment of routes and what makes sense and doesn't make sense from a system that we want to create instead of one we're trying to just adjust. But I think I'm with Steve on that. I'd like a little more data, because I think we did see a significant uptick in ridership once we went fixed out to the Quinn's campus.
Okay, you can certainly look at that. I don't know, Robbie and Scott, if you have anything at this point that you'd want to share on that.
Yeah, I can take a look at it. My recollection is the demand for those stops out at Quinn's was still fairly low, but I'll get like an exact number and share that with y'all.
Okay.
And I mentioned this, but if you like the dates that you put in here of December 6th through March 6th, I would ask that you just be consistent with that, so that as we go from kind of one batch of numbers to another, we can do a decent comparison.
Yeah, I think that that service began when we went to the winter service, so that would have been like kind of like December, 15th or something like that. So I'll look at that time period.
Okay. So if we're ready, I'll go on to the green. Change their frequency from 20 to 30 minutes. So perhaps not as many people upset about that, other than they have to wait longer for the green. The blue, as we said, was sort of a duplicate route. There was certainly a lot of residents that liked it, and there was residents that did not like the increased bus traffic on their roads. So I'd say it was kind of a half and half. Some will definitely miss that frequency and that option. As far as the orange, that's going to be a peak service. I think the whole shift to peak service, it's going to be a change for the patrons. You know, they're used to just knowing a bus is going to come by every 20 minutes or every 30 minutes. So I think we have to really work to make sure we're communicating how the bus is going to be behaving now that we're going to peaks, because that will be something that they haven't really experienced across the system. So I think, you know, communication is obviously key.
And is there any problem? I know we push all this into Google and use Google for a lot of routing kinds of things. Does Google have any issues with this kind of, you know, 20-minute frequency here, 30-minute frequency there kind of thing, or does that all figure into their system?
I would assume it figures into their system because other transit agencies have been doing it for years. So I can't imagine they wouldn't have the capability of handling that.
Okay, good.
And 5 yellow, same thing, you know, we're going to 30-minute frequency. So that is, you know, takes longer to have the bus come around. The 6 line, we're hoping that the change there is actually well received, that we're extending it to Deer Valley. But we're also seeing some savings with, you know, going to a 30-minute frequency in the off-peak hours there. So I think overall, I don't anticipate as much criticism, as people would be happy with the fact that they can have a 1-seat ride. And 7 peak, we've talked about. Purple, we've talked about. 10 white, you know, same thing. It used to be every 10 minutes, and we have gone to 15 minutes and 30 minutes in the off-peak for a while, but you know, that is seen as a loss for sure. That's a heavily ridden route, and but I think it's still going to have adequate coverage with how we've designed it here.
The thing you mentioned that's not on the chart, I guess it's attachment K here, that was showing the dollars and the changes. You said it didn't include the 30-minute piece. So when it's between 7:10 or I got confused. When was it?
Yeah, it's from 7:10 p.m. to 11:10. It goes to 30 minutes. It says 15 minutes on our chart, so that should be 30 right there.
Okay, so the bulk part of the day from 6:40 to 7:10, it's still staying at 15 minutes. Okay, I got a little confused. Thank you.
Right. And the ridership really does drop off, you know, at that time. So 11 black would be peak service only. No real changes there. And then citywide every 30 minutes. And that too has always runs peaks. The trolley, I'm sorry, was there something on the citywide comment? Okay. The trolley, I think, is more a nostalgia kind of thing, you know, and a tourist type item. It has not been running for a long time now with COVID, and you know, we haven't received any comments one way or the other on that, but we just don't see the point in running it given the current situation at hand. Obviously would like to bring it back someday in some capacity, but now it's just not the time.
Kim, this is Caroline. When you are finalizing the time points for the lime and the pink, can you please make sure that especially when we're at 30-minute service, that they're alternating, so we don't have the pink and the lime bus completely overlapping, but people are essentially still getting that 15-minute service. And then to the extent possible, coordinate that with the 10 white for a time transfer to the extent possible.
Right. Okay. And Scott, do you have anything to say about that or looked at that?
Yeah, we'll definitely try to make sure we're doing that.
Is there any other considerations or information that you would like to see?
Hey, Kim, could you just help me with the, is it the pink that now terminates at the canyons? Yes, when did I miss something? I thought the pink at one point came all the way into Park City, and I like the fact that it goes Summit Park, Canyons. I think that's terrific. But my recollection, it was different. When did we change it? And is it just my recollection that needs to be corrected?
Scott, I'm not sure that we changed it.
Yeah, some Pete used to come into town. We changed that with when we added the Ecker Hill Park and Ride and added the 6 Slime out to Ecker Hill Park and Ride.
So that's been a couple of years that the pink has terminated at the canyons.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks. That's good. Hey, just another thought for everybody. You know, when you ride transit systems, and I'll just use Manhattan because that's the one I tend to be on more often than not. You know, you have these local lines and you have express lines. And to use the pink as an example, you could have a pink express that bypassed the neighborhood, the Blue Roof Market neighborhood. And you could run, and this, I'm making it up, but you could run on the top of the hour and the bottom of the hour an express. And then you could run a local. And the local, you could fit in wherever it made sense, and the local would hit all those stops, and the express would eliminate 3/4 of the stops. And the pink is kind of a nice example to think about that way, because we've always said, oh, you know, nobody rides the pink because it goes off on this wonderful sightseeing tour of a neighborhood. And that's correct. You know, you can get on the white and you've got your express. And I'm not talking about creating redundancy with express routes, but this is sort of the structural analysis and opportunity that I think exists. And we have, I don't know if we've looked at, and I say I don't know because I've never heard it talked about. I would assume that this is something that transit folks talk about all the time. You know, we have local routes and express routes, and they're basically using the same route, and they're just, you know, avoiding some stops, and that one becomes the express. But it seems like there might be an opportunity to kind of explore that concept a little further. And I just toss that out there.
Mm-hmm. No, I think that's a great point. And yeah, you know, we do look at things like that all the time. I think where we could do better, and I would like to focus on this more, is getting more public input ahead of time before we get too far down the road on having to make these decisions. I think that, you know, we need to spend more focus and time on that, which is hard in a COVID environment, but it is what it is, and we just have to find a way to understand the public's needs better than what I feel like we're currently able to right now. Okay.
Looks like the ridership out at Quinn's Junction is pretty similar to that of Silver Springs. It's about 2 passengers on average per day.
But is that now, or is that from the winter?
Yeah, that's like December 17th to March 6th.
Okay, thank you.
Interesting.
But we'll put that together in a more succinct way where it's for the council to see when the time is right.
Okay. So between now and the next JTAB, we'll work to get that additional information and come back for a decision so that we can take it forward to our councils. If everybody doesn't have anything else that they want to talk about on that, Caroline, we can go ahead and go to our next item here. You're going to update us on the build grant and 224 and Kimball Junction intersection.
Sure. Unfortunately, I don't have an update on the build grant, other than I know that our lobbyists are working really hard to have our delegation continue to check in with the Secretary's office and offer their support. I think we're going to hear in the next month about the build allocations. On the 224 corridor study, where we are now is, well, I guess, does everybody understand the purpose of the corridor study? Maybe I should start there.
No.
Okay. 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 So the purpose of the corridor study is to look at 224 from Kimball Junction into Park City And that includes a traffic analysis of actually 224 and then some high-level design scenarios for the interchange and how those both work together to mitigate traffic on that corridor. One of the important things to remember about this corridor study is that it's a little different from UDOT's standard process in that this study incorporates bus rapid transit on 224 as its baseline condition. So where we are now is that we've had, yes.
What does that mean? That it's the baseline condition? I know that I know what that means, but what does it mean to everybody else?
So what that means is under the no build scenario, i.e. if UDOT was not making any changes, when they say no build, they assume that bus rapid transit has already been constructed. So they're looking at all of these scenarios, assuming that bus rapid transit is in place and operational throughout the 224 corridor, based on the alternatives analysis that we've already completed. So the goal for this process as developed is to create a community vision for improvements based on the social, environmental, economic, health, and natural contexts of the area. Essentially, that boils down to UDOT wants to create this multimodal solution that addresses not only the truck traffic and the single occupancy vehicle traffic, but also accommodates heavy transit use in this corridor. Where we are now is we've gone through a first round of public input via online survey, which we intended to have stakeholder and public workshops, but because of the pandemic, we didn't get to do that. So we had to do that through an online method. That first draft was completed in June. We had 285 responses. Some of the key themes that we took from those surveys is that people are concerned about parking in Kimball Junction, vehicle access and running errands. Of course, congestion is always one of the things that is always brought up. The top 3 items that respondents strongly agreed with was traffic congestion impacts and how I move through the Kimball Junction area, vehicle stacking on I-80, waiting to move through the Kimball Junction area, and how growth in the area will impact how I travel around. Where we are now is that we've just met with the project team and had some initial concepts for the interchange. And we actually said the consultant team needed to go back and think a lot harder about how to incorporate transit into the proposal they've made for the interchange. UDOT and the consultants were, as they considered bus rapid transit as baseline, but unfortunately that did not translate into the interchange. And I think from a staff level on both the Park City and Summit County side, we were a little surprised that the interchange and adjacent intersections did not consider transit as equal to a vehicle, a personal vehicle, when talking about throughput. So we've sent them back to the drawing board to come back with something a little more creative. And we will hear from the consultant team in the next 2 weeks with some revised concepts for an interchange and the adjacent intersections. And then we will take that to the public for a second round of public input. And that should happen in September, and that's where we are now on that study. Any specific questions?
So from the standpoint of outcomes, what the outcomes of this study, what will it set up for the future?
The outcome will be 3 design concepts for the interchange and subsequent intersections, all in phases that are fiscally constrained and unconstrained. that we can then go take to an environmental process to whittle down those concepts to a preferred alternative.
And further than that, how does that relate to the UDOT's process in relation to the Transportation Commission, the STIP, all of those types of things from a funding perspective?
So once we have a preferred alternative, we will be able to officially get the project, both the interchange and the complementary intersection improvements on the STIP. And then we will be more competitive for funding at both the state and federal process. Of course, when you bring local dollars, you can always move up on the STIP. It's a flexible process, but we need a locally preferred alternative officially adopted.
Thank you.
Okay, and do you want to give us a quick update on the 8 Brown and the changes?
Yeah, Jamie, are you on the phone with?
I am. Yep.
Okay, can you go ahead and give that update, please?
Yep, I will try to be quick. I just want to start by thanking everybody, especially at Park City, Robbie and Franklin, Andy, Scott and Vinny, and everybody, Kim, that helped pull this off. And it's still a process, but it sounds like so far it's successful. Just started today. Gotten a few calls from people who just are concerned that the same stops and the same loop will be serviced, which it will be. So the only thing that changes is the vehicle. And once our app is up and running, which we've been told it should be in the next day or two, people will be able to request a deviation. So as long as it's in the Trailside neighborhood, the shuttle, it has the size capacity to go in and out of streets, and they can pick people up, like a door-to-door service and a limited availability for rides requested for that. So we're hoping that people are excited about that. The feedback I've gotten so far is that it's going well. So I'm trying to get through that quickly because I know we're short on time. Are there any questions?
Thank you.
Just one, since we probably won't meet again for a while. Could you maybe a week from now or something just send an update that, I mean, you can send it to Kim or to Matt or whatever, and that'll get it to us. But if we could just kind of do a check-in once it's been running for a week or two or something and let us know how it's going.
That's a great idea. I definitely will.
Thank you.
Okay, great. I'll go on next to our ridership report. Okay.
So, excuse me. Yeah, same kind of trends we're seeing. Ridership's way down, still within that like 70, 80%. I think I don't necessarily have many comments on this slide or the next one, and then the ones that come after that are maybe more relevant at this point in time. So if anybody has any comments, questions about these first 2 slides, maybe we can go to that now. So the ridership timeline, the next slide or the next page in this report is, we've kind of had some discussion about this. The drop off in ridership is extreme from that winter March into COVID shutdown time. Our ridership has increased slightly since we bottomed out. I'm looking at like 7-day averages every week, and it looks like we have pretty much flattened out. We're like this last 7 days compared to the 7 days before that, we were actually down by 2%, and the previous week we were up by 1%. So it's pretty level at this point. We're not seeing increases. We're kind of just hovering right around the same. But
is this consistent with what you guys are hearing from like other, I know you guys follow other transit areas and stuff like that. Does this kind of match what you see in Salt Lake or what you would see around the country, especially at other resort kind of areas? Are we consistent or some sort of anomaly?
I have not looked at other resort towns. inclination is that we are maybe a bit more impacted because of being a resort town. So we're losing out on the people that are, you know, especially with the silly Sundays, for example, like that we always had really high ridership on the weekends due to, you know, people coming up here and getting out for the weekend. And without those, that's where, you know, every weekend our ridership is down more than it is throughout the week. But I mean, kind of from my perspective, we're really seeing what the transit dependent population is.
Yeah, nationally, you know, at first when this started, we were trending like most agencies, you know, seeing like a 90% reduction. But it does seem to be that we're separating now and that we are being hit a little bit harder than the numbers I've heard across the nation for other agencies. So it could very well be because of the resort community aspect.
Kim, you had mentioned an interesting tidbit to me about UTA's plans.
Yes.
Summarize what you had heard, because they, you know, our policymakers might find that interesting.
Yes, so they are having a change day today, and they are restoring most of their service. They're getting back to about 93% of their service. What I've been told is that's not necessarily because the ridership demand is there. They're still experiencing, you know, pretty considerable loss of ridership. But the belief is that, you know, if you cut the service too much, the people won't come back to the service. So you have to create the opportunity, and then you'll gain your ridership from there. So that is what they're doing as of August 24th today. Okay.
I think that's a really good point about if you cut it too much, it'll take longer to recover in the long term.
Yes.
So I think that's an important lesson we can take going forward.
Yeah, definitely. It's a very delicate balance. So, right. Is there any other questions on the ridership report? We are actually at the 10 o'clock a.m. hour. I don't know. I think it might be best if we maybe move our bus stop improvement recommendations to the next JTAB meeting in September, especially because of the impact of the pink on some of those stops. We may want to recommend different stops, so that would give us some time to look at that. And I can certainly not perform the COVID update, because the slides are there if you'd like to read that. So,
Kim, is there anything you need for that moving the bus stop piece out a month? Is there anything that, like, work was really critical because we were trying to get stuff done this fall or anything like that? Or can you guys continue to make progress?
There's not necessarily a hard deadline, so I think we can continue to make progress. We're not in risk of, you know, losing the money or anything like that, so it should be okay.
Okay.
Okay. If there's no further business, I guess we'll go ahead and we could adjourn the meeting.
I'll move adjourn.
Okay.
Second.
Thank you.
Aye.
Aye. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah,
Thank
thank
you.
you. That was really helpful. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, next meeting will be September 15th.
All right.
Thanks, everybody.